I'm Jeff Porter, and welcome to Sip Trip.
My name is Jeff Porter, and I have spent the better half of 20 years pouring and pairing wines for people to enjoy. In this time, I've traveled the world searching for the perfect glass to share with guests. And in these travels, I've not only fallen in love with the wine, I've fallen in love with the individuals and families I've met. Through wine, I've gotten the chance to meet all sorts of people and share in their stories and many unexpected adventures. I've decided to ask a few friends to join me as we seek our own adventures across Italy to discover culture through beverage. Welcome to Sip Trip. When you hear the word Chianti Classico, what comes to mind? For many, it's red checkered tablecloths, a bottle of wine in a wicker basket, spaghetti and meatballs, chicken parm and lasagna. Maybe it also conjures up the idyllic cities of Florence and Siena, or the rolling hills straight out of an Under the Tuscan Sun fantasy. It is some of this, but it's also so much more. Chianti Classico is a land of art, culture, history, invention, passion, and a people deeply connected to its roots and its stories. From the Etruscans to today, the area of Chianti Classico, smack in the center of Tuscany between the cities of Florence and Siena, is the beginning of what many believe is the cradle of the modern Western world. Let's explore. Italian food in America has long been linked to dishes that were created by Italian immigrants in the late 19th and early 20th century to make them feel closer to home. Those dishes evolved into the canon of Italian American food. Yet, the food of Italy is deeply rooted in regionality. Tuscany is known for its cured meats, saltless bread, homemade pastas, and most famously, its beef. There's no better champion of the classic Tuscan table than the butcher Dario Cecchini. Based in the small hamlet of Panzano in the heart of Chianti Classico, Dario has continued his family's legacy of being butchers, but has taken their craft to new heights while helping to maintain a historic breed of cattle only found in Tuscany, the Chianina.
Possiamo celebrare in convivio il rito della bistecca alla fiorentina. Un'altezza di 4 dita, una carne maturata perlomeno per un mese, un taglio perfetto con il coltello del macellaio e una brace di quercia e di leccio e 2 bicchieri di vino Chianti Classico, chiaramente, al maestro di griglia. 8 minuti per parte, 8 minuti dall'altra parte e 15 minuti in piedi di lato alla griglia. E poi, se è possibile, da mangiare a morsi.
A morsi, questo, a morsi.
Buonissimo. Grazie, Dario.
It's so good!
Well, the first time I came here, I tried Chianti beef, and I remember telling you, that was the best beef I've ever had in my life. Next level shit is this, eating here, hanging out with you right across the table, breaking bread with you. This really is bringing it all together. So yeah, it's a cerebral, visceral, tactile, emotional sensation.
I think this is the role of a good food and good wine, no? So making people together and friendship.
The beauty of regions with a millennia worth of history is that legends are passed down from generation to generation. There are many famed wine legends around the world, but the legend of why the Gallo Nero, or Black Rooster, is the symbol of Chianti Classico is one of the most famous, or infamous.
So the Black Rooster is the symbol of Chianti Classico, and there's a legend going back to the Middle Ages. There was 2 cities that were north and south of the region of Chianti, Florence and Siena. But those cities were fighting over the control of the land, and they decided to settle the dispute by trial. And the trial consisted in a knight leaving the gates of Florence at the rooster's crow, and the knight leaving the gates of Siena at the rooster's crow. And the meeting point would be the border. So the Senesi got a white rooster, and they probably overfed him. The Fiorentini got a black, scrawny rooster, didn't give him any food, and that gives you a little hint about mentality of my people. And put him in a sty, put a black cloth on top of the sty. When they took the black cloth away, it was still pitch dark outside, but the animal thought, oh, there's a little light, maybe food is coming. So it started crowing like there was no tomorrow. So the knight on horseback left the gates of Florence much earlier than his counterpart, and the meeting point was down in the village of Fonterutoli, which is only 3 miles outside Siena, and it's about 50 miles from Florence. So since then, the Black Rooster has become the symbol of our region, the Gallo Nero.
Pretty powerful.
How much of that's bullshit and how much is that true?
Chianti Classico is a story that began over 1,000 years ago. The land between Florence and Siena was always destined for the vine, the olive, and grain. The Etruscans knew it, the Romans knew it, and everyone since has been given the opportunity to know it as well. Some did not. This is a region that's history shaped the Western world with its art, banking, trade, cuisine, thought, and of course its wine. Together, these are things that represent Chianti Classico and its tradition. But tradition can be a double-edged sword. It can mean different things to different people. Does it light the path or hold you back? In a place such as Chianti Classico, it has done both. But today the future is bright because tradition has not just been passed down between generations, it has been reinvigorated by the region's youth. Generations rebel when pushed, and today the region is lucky to have a new generation inspired by not just their traditions, but by their great-great-grandparents' lives. Places steeped in tradition can sometimes be hemmed in by their own greatness and not allowed to grow. But once the idea of tradition is integrated with the energy of innovators and passionate people, traditions can continue to thrive and grow.
Going on, the younger people are much more respectful than the older one, because we are going even much more harder to seeking what was forgotten in the past. So we're talking about wines, forgotten varieties that nobody wanted anymore. We're going seeking back these kind of things because it's our culture. As being born in a world that is, everybody is connected, we need to go back to seeking what has made us what we are now.
Every generation we have to renovate traditions that are surviving and the ones that are dynamic. Otherwise they die. So we have to keep the roots, the DNA of the most important asset that for us is Sangiovese.
No trip to Tuscany is complete without a visit to Siena, and one cannot fully understand the story of Chianti Classico without the Sienese connection. Its neighbor to the north, Florence, is renowned for all things Renaissance while also feeling modern and hip. After all, the Negroni was invented here. Siena is a city that is firmly rooted in its traditions. The most famous tradition, known worldwide, is the Il Palio, a horse race that happens each July and August in the heart of the city. The city's 17 contrada, or districts, compete for bragging rights and the honor of maintaining a tradition that dates back to the medieval times.
Siena is a city of passion. Sienese people are so proud of their traditions, of the Palio, of the contradas, of Chianti Classico, of course.
What are contradas?
Contradas are districts. We have 17 contradas in Siena. They keep the town safe, but most importantly, they maintain our traditions.
This piazza is very famous for the Palio race. It was built in late 1200s, early 1300s, so it's got a lot of history. This is where the horse actually run around the piazza.
The track is on the outside of the circle, right?
Correct.
And is it, how many times do they run around?
3 times.
3 times?
Yes.
And it's who gets there first?
So the horse wins even if the jockey falls, which is, you hear all the Piazza del Campo, 40,000 people screaming, go, 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 even to the horse.
How often do the jockeys fall off?
Very often.
What happens when your contrada wins?
First of all, you start running from wherever you are, and you come here to greet the horse and the jockey, and all the contrada meets here in Piazza del Campo. Then you start crying and hugging each other, and we just start singing and being thankful. It's very hard to describe. That's why you have to come to Siena and live it.
When you pour yourself a glass of wine, do you think of the people behind it? What many people forget is the production of wine is agriculture, and agriculture in any form is one of the most challenging and unforgiving professions in the world. You can influence much, but ultimately the fate of your crop is out of your hands. Now imagine on top of having a farm, you're an outsider, farming land without the knowledge of generations that came before you on the same plot. Add to this, you're also a young woman in a place where machismo is very present. The struggle to persevere against the odds, to be accepted through hard work, and to eventually shine and be considered a peer is who Paula Cook is. She represents the identity, culture, history, and future of Chianti Classico. Her story is a dream and a cautionary tale.
So when I moved here and I took over an estate that had 300 years of history, for me I was like, going rummaging through the books, looking what the grape varieties were, why they picked them, where they planted them. It's all about the territory, it's all about respecting it, it's all about, you know, finding a balance. I think probably the first reaction was probably like, what's this little Canadian girl doing here? And she thinks she's gonna make Chianti Classico wine. And after a few years, maybe like 2.5, 3 years in, all of a sudden, you know, people started showing up at my door and they were like, Limicini's back on the map. What's happened? Who's here? Who's doing this, you know? And I was like, it's me, you know? And they're like, really? Wow, cool. Like, and how did you come up with this idea? And I'm like, I just listened, you know? I just listened to people, stories, the land, the style, and this is what came out of it.
Chianti Classico is the world's oldest designated wine region, having been decreed by Cosimo de' Medici III in 1716. His declaration honored the region of Chianti and protected it from those seeking to make a buck off a name without actually being part of a region. Over 100 years later, a curious, steadfast landowner and future Prime Minister of Italy, Bettino Ricasoli, began to research and obsess over what could make Chianti Classico even better. With the help of University of Pisa professor Cesare Studiati, in many years of work in his vineyards, he and the professor ultimately decided that there was a certain combination of grapes, a recipe if you will, that would make the best wine possible, not for quantity, but for quality. Not everyone agreed, but for nearly 100 years, Ricasoli's recipe was the standard. Today, the recipe has changed somewhat, but the anchor and heart of Chianti Classico is still Sangiovese.
The original recipe of Chianti Classico was written in September 1872. Mi confermai nei risultati ottenuti già nelle prime esperienze, cioè che il vino riceve dal Sangiovese, la dose principale del suo profumo e una certa vigoria di sensazione. Dal canaiolo, l'amabilità che tempera la durezza del primo, senza togliergli nulla del suo profumo per esserne pur esso dotato. La malvasia, della quale si potrebbe fare a meno nei vini destinati all'invecchiamento, tende a diluire il prodotto delle due prime uve, ne accresce il sapore e lo rende più leggero e più prontamente adoperabile all'uso della tavola quotidiana. Questa è la ricetta.
Thank you so much.
Ancora.
To judge something on its parts is to do a disservice to oneself and the subject of study. To think that Chianti Classico is just a wine is to miss the identity of the place. Chianti Classico is the land, the people, the history, the food, the weather, the friendly rivalry between cities, the passion. It is not just fermented grapes. It is a living entity with a past, present, and future. To drink the wine is the first step. To visit and partake in the entirety of it is how we will all learn more about each other and ultimately live happier lives.
What's so beautiful here about Florence is you can come in, you can get your history on, get your Italian scarf on, get your babida on, eat, drink,